Every night, he amazingly cleaned her office, then she surprisingly revealed, "Can we transform this fight into something bigger?" As Jack pushed the mop across the polished floor of Laura's office, he lost himself in the rhythm. Here, where powerful voices clashed against injustice, he felt like a ghost, watchful, yet forgotten. Each sweep of his mop carried the weight of his dreams deferred, lost to late-night shifts where he could simply provide for Tommy. The child's laughter echoed around the cramped corners of their one-bedroom apartment. It turned the starkness of his life into fleeting moments of joy, but underneath it all, doubt festered. Was this it? Was he destined to remain invisible? He could overhear snippets of conversation through the thin walls, the fierce debates about cases that reached far beyond legal jargon. Tonight, Laura's voice broke through the silence, tinged with an urgency that made his heart race. "I can't take this burden alone." She spoke softly, yet her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. The case she referred to, the discrimination, the injustice it represented, wasn't just a page in a thick folder. It was real. It was about people like him. Jack hesitated at the edge of her desk, his heart pounding. He didn't belong here among the stars of the legal world. Fear crawled up his spine. What could he possibly add to the conversation? Yet deep inside, where the frustrations of his own life pulsated, something began to awaken. The people he cleaned up after, didn't know the half of it, the struggles he faced in his community. "Maybe, just maybe, before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Jack took a breath and stepped into the room, his voice barely above a whisper. "Laura, I have an idea." The moment hung heavy in the air, filled with the echoes of his self-doubt dragging at his insides. The way she turned, her surprise evident, made him question everything. Would she laugh? Would she brush him off, as he had feared from his colleagues? But instead, there was something in her eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement that pulled him in. As they discussed the idea, nerves turned into determination. In the process, Jack found himself questioning everything he believed about his role as a janitor. The societal divide that rendered him invisible began to feel like a cage he longed to break. The darker corners of his life, fearful thoughts, the worry of letting Tommy down, the doubt that splintered his resolve, were suddenly stark against the awakening within him. Would he choose to stay safe in the shadows or dare to step into the light? But with every step closer, threads of reality twisted tighter around him. Pushback from colleagues loomed ominously. Laura's struggles with expectations, the burdens and biases she faced, felt like tangible weights pressing against his chest. The thought of confronting that world was daunting. Would they see him as an ally, or just a janitor? At that moment, as they shared their fears amidst the clutter of the office, the stakes grew impossibly high. A confrontation with a senior partner could shatter everything they built. Jack clenched his fists, torn between the push to fight for something bigger and the urge to retreat back into the comfort of solitude. Laura's next words hung in the charged air like a spark ready to ignite. "Can we really transform this fight into something bigger?" The question echoed, filling the space, each heartbeat pounding louder. Jack's mind reeled as Laura's question lingered in the air, taunting him. Could he really transform their ideas into tangible action? He had always been the one to step back and observe, the one who cleaned up after others rather than take the lead. But now, as he stood in a room thick with tension and possibility, he felt a flicker of courage. The thought of remaining silent while injustice unfolded around him felt more daunting than the potential backlash of stepping forward. "I think we can," he finally said, surprising even himself. The words felt weighty, imbued with a determination he hadn't known was within him. A commitment to reveal not only Laura's challenges but also his own observations. The struggles they shared, bubbled up in him like a simmering kettle, waiting to spill over. They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas. Jack found himself animatedly discussing practical steps, sharing insights from the community in which he lived and worked. He had seen firsthand how discrimination twisted lives and choked opportunities. It wasn't just about Laura's case, it was about revealing a larger narrative that played out within the walls of the law firm and beyond. As Jack shared his thoughts, he noticed Laura leaning in, captivated. Her attention teased out a sense of clarity he hadn't felt before. What had started as an overwhelming sense of inadequacy began to morph into a sense of responsibility. He was no longer just a janitor, he was a voice that had been waiting to be heard. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Once the brainstorming session echoed down to a close, Jack felt a subtle shift within him. There was a fire igniting, a sense of purpose he had never expected to discover. But what if they reject us? He asked suddenly, the fear creeping back. What if he stood up only to be met with ridicule, dismissed as just another labor? Laura met his gaze, the strength in her brown eyes unwavering. Then we pivot, she said firmly, her confidence contagious. We explore other routes. But we stay silent. Not regarding this is bigger than both of us. For the first time, Jack felt like an equal partner in this venture. Her reduction of their potential defeat into insignificance nudged him into a realization failure was not the end, it was an opportunity for growth. He wanted to see this through, not just for Laura but for Tommy and for every other soul who felt voiceless. For once, the fear of failure was overshadowed by the possibility of progress. The next step loomed large in their minds, confronting the senior partner. Jack's heart beat erratically at the thought of facing someone so embedded in the hierarchy. Panic threatened to smother his resolve. "You'll stand with me, right?" he asked, looking straight into Laura's eyes, hoping his voice didn't betray the anxiety curling around him. "Always," she stated, and he felt a rush of reassurance. But did he truly understand the gravity of what they were about to undertake? The layers of vulnerability and exposure unnerved him, but just as quickly, he recognized it was time to break free from the suffocating fear that had dictated his choices for so long. As they finalized their strategy, Jack was losing himself in the possibilities that lay ahead, his mind racing with a newfound sense of purpose. But he couldn't shake off the nagging voice in the back of his mind, the fear that the moment they entered that meeting room, everything they built would crumble. In that moment of quiet before the storm, Jack resolved to embrace vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. Yet, what truly terrified him was not the fear of confrontation, but the impending realization that this fight wasn't about winning, it was about standing up regardless of the outcome. With an electric tension building between them, they stood poised at the edge of a precipice, ready to step into the unknown. The moment of truth was drawing closer, compelling Jack to confront his own identity anew. He was ready to face it head-on, but as he took a deep breath, he couldn't shake off the shadow of doubt. What would happen when the facade shattered and the truth spilled out? Jack arrived at the office the following day with a sense of quiet determination. He looked around at the familiar surroundings, the gleaming floors and the sharp scent of polished wood tinged with coffee. This space had always seemed devoid of opportunity for someone like him, yet now felt charged with potential. Today, however, wasn't just another day of cleaning, it was the culmination of his newfound commitment. As he prepared for the meeting with the senior partner, Jack's hands trembled slightly. He was acutely aware of his station, just a janitor whose presence typically faded into the background. Yet today, he was stepping into a vital role. Every moment spent cleaning Laura's office humming with ambition now felt like an act of preparation for something greater. The thought of confronting the senior partner filled him with anxiety, but Laura's unwavering support echoed in his mind. "We pivot," she had said, and that sentiment steeled his resolve. It was better to face potential ridicule than to remain silent. He practiced the words he would say, simple but powerful truths about the shared experiences of those who felt unseen, until they flowed easily from his lips. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting time, he felt the weight of purpose sinking in. Jack understood this was not just about him or Laura but about challenging the status quo entrenched in the firm's very culture. It was a confrontation against apathy, an act against the systemic dismissal of voices like theirs. The stakes felt high, yet they propelled him forward. When Laura arrived, her entry brought a jolt of energy into the tense atmosphere. Seeing her, he immediately felt reassured. "Ready?" she asked, a spark of confidence radiating from her. "More than ever," he replied, surprising himself again. As they made their way to the conference room, nerves danced in Jack's stomach. Laura opened the door, and they stepped inside, the sun streaming in through the large windows. The senior partner was seated behind an expansive desk, the authority in the room palpable. Jack's heart raced, yet he didn't allow his fear to silence him. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of what he had to say. Laura initiated the conversation, her voice steady as she outlined the concerns they were there to address. Jack watched her, admiring her composure. Then came his moment. As the senior partner began to respond, dismissing their concerns with practiced ease, Jack felt an internal shift. This was at the moment to raise his voice. He interrupted, surprising even himself with the strength of his words. "Respectfully, what Laura and I are discussing affects many people within this firm," he said. The gravity of the moment crystallized in his mind. "It's not just about one case, it's about establishing a culture of respect and opportunity for those who've long been overlooked." The room fell silent. Jack could feel the intensity of their gazes locked onto him, some skeptical, some surprised. But there was something refreshing about breaking the mold. Each word felt like a thread unraveling the fabric of doubt and fear he had woven around himself for so long. Though he was met with skepticism, he pressed on, emphasizing the stories of countless others who remained voiceless. Something within him ignited as he spoke. Unbeknownst to him, he had unearthed a talent for articulation, an ability to capture the essence of empathy in a corporate world often devoid of it. With every sentence, he felt like he was moving closer to the truth of who he was meant to be. Once the meeting concluded, Jack felt a rush of exhilaration interlaced with exhaustion. They hadn't resolved everything, but the act of standing up had transformed him in ways he never anticipated. The foundation of personal discovery had begun, and he knew it would take more than words to implement change. Looking over at Laura, he saw pride mingled with a hint of fatigue. "You were amazing," she said softly, squeezing his arm. "Thanks, but there's still a long road ahead." His voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping back in, but he had to ask himself what was his part in that journey. The shadows of doubt still hung, but he realized they were no longer shrouding him in fear, they pushed him toward an internal reckoning. As they left the office, Jack felt the world shift beneath him, an exhilarating uncertainty ready to be embraced. But as they stepped outside, the lingering question remained: what challenges lay ahead that would demand even more courage than the one he just summoned? The following days unfolded like an uncharted map, each moment layered with the tantalizing promise of growth. Jack arrived at work with a newfound commitment that radiated from the depths of his being. Each stride across the office floor felt like a silent declaration of his intent. He recognized that this wasn't merely a routine, it was a platform for transformation. His conversations with Laura continued to evolve beyond the confines of their initial meeting. They huddled during lunch breaks, exchanging strategies for pushing their agenda. She further encouraged him to hone his voice, coaching him on how to craft compelling narratives around the concerns they aimed to address. There was a potency in their discussions, a palpable energy that Jack had never felt before. Knowledge began to feel less like an abstract concept and more like a weapon he could wield. Jack found himself reading more, diving into literature that examined corporate dynamics and stories of those who had successfully instigated change. Each text resonated deeply, their lessons intertwining with his personal experiences. He discovered an affinity for storytelling, which ignited a passion he never realized was dormant. It was exciting to find these hidden facets of himself, and with each page turned, he prepared himself for the uphill climb ahead. Critical moments came after an impromptu conversation with a junior associate who often lingered in the shadows of the office. The associate voiced frustrations over being overlooked for career advancement, recounting tales of hard work met with dismissive nods. Jack listened intently, feeling his heart ache for those stories. In that moment, he realized how many people felt the same way he once did, lost, sidelined, and silenced. Have you thought about joining Laura and me in bringing this up with management? Jack suddenly asked. They shared a brief but poignant moment, a flicker of hope forming between them. It was then that he realized that advocacy was a muscle that could be developed together, an understanding that complacency would only reinforce the status quo. However, seeds of doubt still blossomed within his mind. Was he truly capable of leading those conversations? Could he channel the collective frustrations into something actionable and effective? There were nights he would lie awake, haunted by the what-ifs. The coffee-stained papers scattered across his desk became the battleground of his persistent overthinking. But in these moments of vulnerability, a flicker of resilience shone bright. He learned to embrace uncertainty, understanding that fear often cloaked the onset of significant transformation. The turning point came when Laura proposed the idea of organizing a workshop where everyone could share their concerns and ideas for improvement in the workplace. It would be an opportunity to create a safe space for dialogue, a platform for people to reclaim their voices. That was the tipping point for Jack, the chance to facilitate conversations that mattered. But as they began planning, an unsettling reality emerged. Resistance from upper management loomed like a dark cloud overhead. Jack recalled their first meeting with the senior partner, and the memory of dismissal hung over him. He felt the urgency to act but was plagued by fear of backlash. The stakes rose, not just for him but for those who would dare to step into the light. In the near distance, the firm's annual review approached, shrouded in formality, where voices would either be heard or silenced once again. Jack grasped the tension in the air as he contemplated the workshop. What if they portrayed their initiative as a direct challenge? What if the very act of voicing these concerns put their jobs at risk? Yet, the thought of remaining silent felt equally unbearable. Would they risk everything to stand together, to expose the truth in front of everyone? The moment of truth hovered on the horizon, and Jack had to decide, would he step into the role of an advocate standing for change, or retreat into the shadows of fear? As the clock ticked down towards the workshop, Jack felt the growing weight of his decision press on him. His heart pulsed with urgency, but a deeper instinct urged him to fight. The choices he made now could reshape his future, but the real question licked at him like a flame: would he dare embrace the full capacity of someone who had once been voiceless? Jack sat at his desk, the short breaths of anxiety weaving into the rhythm of the ticking clock. The workshop loomed large in his mind, and the mere thought of initiating change in a room filled with decision makers felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Each minute felt elongated, moments slipping away as he grappled with the weight of potential outcomes. The office buzzed around him, yet he felt oddly isolated. His heart raced as he reviewed the notes before him. Layered within the pages were arguments he had crafted alongside Laura, outlines of presentations that heralded the unfortunate voice of the silenced. Fragments of ideas about realigning the firm's values and pushing for transparency merged with scattered thoughts of what his future might hold. Just days ago, he had felt the fire of inner resolve. Now, doubt began to seep through the cracks. Why me? He asked himself, biting his lip. Could he truly champion this cause? What if the backlash was too overwhelming? Fear was easy to embrace, the comfort of complacency begged him to retreat into familiarity. But his thoughts were interrupted by the sudden entrance of Laura, her expression a mix of concern and determination. Jack, we need to talk about the approach, she urged, her voice pulling him back from his spiraling thoughts. Yes, the logistics, right? He replied, trying to mask his uncertainty with an air of focus. It's more than that. We have to be prepared for the pushback, she pointedly remarked. But more importantly, we need to articulate our objectives clearly. What are we fighting for? Jack took a breath, collecting his thoughts. I want to create an environment where everyone feels valued, where feedback leads to meaningful change. I've heard too many stories of dissatisfaction. We can't let fear stifle our ambition. Laura nodded, but Jack could tell her worry remained. I understand you feel a sense of urgency, she offered softly, her gaze steady. But we have to navigate this carefully. If we launch into it recklessly, it could blow up in our faces. We may lose credibility. Losing credibility is a risk we have to be willing to take if we're going to initiate real change. Do we continue to remain quiet and allow our colleagues to suffer, or do we take a stand and fight for what's right? The conviction in his voice surprised even himself. Laura's eyes sparkled with understanding, as if she recognized the shift within him. Okay. Let us refine our message, make it as clear as possible. We need to help them see this isn't just our agenda, this is for the betterment of everyone at the firm. It's time to lend our ears to those who've been unheard. Hours passed like minutes as they strategized, laser-focused, exchanging stories, practicing the language they would use, and building confidence. Each moment nurtured the resolve that had begun to germinate within Jack. He understood that victories were seldom won without pushing through an unsteady threshold of discomfort. As they neared the final stages of their preparation, the dread surrounding the annual review returned. Would they capture the attention of the management, or would their voices be drowned out by the constricting atmosphere? Suddenly, a new concern emerged. What if someone exposed their plans before they had the chance to present? Jack's breath caught in his throat, and he felt a surge of doubt. Everything we've done so far matters, Laura reiterated, stretching her fingers as if to shake off shadows of disbelief. We need to own our narrative, the powerful stories that resonate with everyone. In that moment, Jack realized storytelling was not just about engaging an audience, it was his opportunity to transform the narrative, both personally and professionally. He could take those hidden stories, fuel his passion and transform them into a movement, small yet powerful, but as their meeting wrapped up, a nagging thought clawed at him. What did he truly want? The tension simmered in the air, and his heart clenched with realization. This was about more than just the workshop, it was about paving a path for himself, for those in the shadows waiting for someone to turn the light on them. The decision was at hand, and Jack felt the tug of destiny. With change pressing against him like an unyielding tide, he could no longer stand at the shore. Tomorrow's workshop was not only an opportunity for others but also a defining moment for him. The real question became palpable: would he truly step forward into the light or allow the darkness of complacency to engulf him once more, risking it all for a truth that demanded to be spoken? As the shadows deepened outside the office, one truth remained clear: his journey was far from over. How far would he go to ensure that the voices of the overlooked were heard? The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to merge with Jack's racing heartbeat as he arrived early the next day. The conference room was stark, with long tables reflecting the harshness of the atmosphere that felt stifling in a way that made his stomach twist. Yet it was that very discomfort which had ignited a fire within him. This time, he would not shy away. Today was the day he would confront his fears. Setting up the projector, he rehearsed the opening line that Laura had helped him refine. Today, we're here to ensure every voice in this firm is lifted and valued, he whispered to himself, testing the weight of the words. But the echoes of those who spoke in hushed tones in the break room haunted him. Were his convictions robust enough to withstand the inevitable scrutiny? He had come so far from that moment of self-doubt, but the specter of failure still loomed heavily. The office trickled in, seasoned executives with expressions ranging from skeptical to indifferent. Their presence brought a new wave of anxiety crashing against Jack's resolve. He forced himself to breathe, anchoring himself in the purpose he had found with Laura. This wasn't merely about him, it was about the collective, those unseen contributors who did not have the luxury of standing in the spotlight. Jack, are you ready? Laura's voice cut through his thoughts like a lifeline. She appeared at his side, offering a reassuring nod that reminded him of their shared burden and goal. He returned the gesture with a half-smile, bolstered by her presence. But dread crept in again as the others settled into their seats. There was a palpable tension in the air, a gut feeling that something monumental was about to unfold. He glanced at the clock, then back at Laura, who gave him a slight push toward the front. It was now or never. As he started his presentation, he felt the eyes of the decision-makers bore into him, dissecting his every word. We must embrace transparency, he articulated, his voice slightly trembling yet holding firm. Only through shared dialogue can we cultivate an environment that encourages feedback and innovation. Each point he delivered was carefully aligned with real stories he had gathered from fellow employees. It was no longer just data, these were lived experiences woven into a narrative that demanded attention, but as he progressed, a hand shot up from one of the senior managers, a cynical expression painting his face. You think the firm has a transparency issue? Have you considered how operational structure may be affected by this sort of feedback? The question struck Jack like a blow. The seasoned man's questioning baited him to retreat, to cloak his message in the comfort of submissiveness. Yet, recognizing the challenge fortified his resolve. Yes, a structure is essential, Jack replied slowly, each word carefully chosen. But if the foundation is riddled with cracks of dissatisfaction, how can we expect to build appropriately? You wouldn't ignore a leak in your home, why should we ignore the need for change in our culture? A murmur rippled through the room at that comment, and for a heartbeat, Jack felt hope shift within him. He pressed on, balancing his vulnerability with strength, until he reached the defining climax of his speech. I'm not asking you to take a leap of faith in this shift, just a small step. Let us prioritize our employees' voices and create a safe space for feedback. The room remained silent for a long moment, and he could feel the weight of their scrutiny again, yet this time it felt different. Rather than being crushed beneath it, he found a strange peace. Maybe their uncertain expressions meant they were considering the merit of his argument, no longer brushing it aside as just another disruption. After the presentation, Jack sat down, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. This was just the beginning, he had cast the stone, but would the ripples follow? His heart raced in a mix of anxiety and anticipation. What if they come at us? Laura asked quietly as the backlash settled in their minds. They might, Jack replied thoughtfully, realizing this battle was only his first of many, but I'm ready. As the room began to buzz with conversation, Jack spotted the senior manager who had questioned him earlier gravitating toward a small group of colleagues. Their expressions were animated, a stark contrast to the initial drudgery. A movement was afoot. But was he prepared for the full scope of what that would entail? With every step Jack took, he questioned whether he had enough fuel to navigate the inevitable storms ahead. Was it too late to turn back, or had he already ignited change? The stark reality surfaced in vivid clarity, the road to transformation was fraught with challenges, and he would have to truly confront what lay ahead to ensure his mission didn't falter. The next decision would shape not just this moment, but his entire career. How far was he willing to go to embrace this new reality? The following days unfolded like a blurry painting, the tension in the office thickening with each passing moment. Jack sensed the whispers growing louder in the hallways, their curious undertones often tinged with skepticism but sometimes something more, a hint of inspiration. Even so, this nascent energy felt daunting. What lay ahead was both a chance to further his vision and the potential for further backlash. After the presentation, he found himself more immersed in the politics of office dynamics than he anticipated. Colleagues approached him, voices laden with either cautious curiosity or outright disdain. He sparked conversations but also heightened scrutiny, and beneath the surface, resentment simmered among some he had previously regarded as allies. Have you thought about the implications on hierarchy, Jack? One colleague asked, leaning almost conspiratorially against the partition wall as though sharing a hidden secret. It could stir the pot quite a bit. His chest tightened at the thought. Navigating the complexities of office politics had never been his strength. It meant dredging through uncomfortable truths that could have implications for his career and reputation. Maybe, Jack replied cautiously. But maybe it's about time we start stirring things. Stability without progress is stagnation. The word sounded bold in his mind, yet a quiet doubt lingered. Was he truly ready to take on the entire structure? The concept was intoxicating but terrifying as well. During breaks, he found solace in conversations with Laura, who remained unyieldingly optimistic amidst the shifting tides. You're planting the seeds, Jack, she often reminded him, her hands animated as she spoke. It's okay if not everyone sees it yet. Change takes time. Each talk became a balm, easing his frayed nerves while simultaneously fueling his resolve. However, despite her encouragement, the specter of failure nestled deep within him. Every time he entered the conference room, the weighty air dynamically shifted, the expectancy hung over him. Then it happened. Jack overheard a conversation in the break room that sent his mind reeling. Two senior managers, powerful men, huddled near the coffee machine, the words directed like arrows aimed at him. "Doesn't it matter how many voices he tries to listen to if all he does is make noise," one chuckled bitterly. "Change isn't always productive." Anger surged through him, a righteous indignation that threatened to bubble over. How could they dismiss what he was attempting to achieve? There was conviction in the voices he represented. Yet, as he stood frozen, a stark realization washed over him. He was on the precipice of larger consequences. Tightening his jaw, Jack chose a different route. He wouldn't confront them directly. Instead, he would keep collecting stories, deepening his network within the company. He needed allies, commissions of empathy echoing his hard truths. He would make these senior managers see the importance of their perspectives in due time, not through conflict, but through invitation. The days morphed into a whirlwind of interviews, snapshots of experiences shared through coffee breaks and lunch. Jack honed in on anger, frustration, and the yearning for change. Then he fashioned that into a compelling follow-up presentation he hoped would elevate the voices he had recently amplified, but just as he began compiling the narratives into a cohesive message, Laura dropped a bombshell. "Jack, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. You have support, but not everyone's on board. We need a definitive strategy to sway the management." Hollow uncertainty filled him. This wasn't merely about being ready for a second attempt. The next step could irrevocably alter his path. The reality of strategic planning gripped him. He sat quietly, contemplating Laura's challenge. Could he develop a more nuanced approach? Could he pivot from merely presenting facts to orchestrating change in the hearts and minds of his colleagues? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the office, Jack felt the weight of his choices settle heavily on his shoulders. Every night seemed to bring him closer to a crossroads he felt ill-equipped to navigate, yet there remained an undeniable urge to push forward. The next move would not just define his vision, it would determine the professional legacy he was beginning to construct. Faced with the paradox of readiness versus self-doubt, Jack knew the time had come to engage the very leaders who had scoffed at his initial proposal. The question screamed for resolution. Would he confront them head-on with his newfound resolve or seek an alternate path to sway their opinions? One way or another, Jack was on the brink of something pivotal. Every moment counted, and only he could choose how to proceed. The days that followed became a delicate balancing act for Jack. Navigating the treacherous waters of corporate dynamics required strategy, but the increasing pressure of upcoming decisions weighed heavily on him. Each morning brought a whirlwind of thoughts that spun around the same question: how could he sway those who challenged his vision without appearing confrontational? Laura's encouragement echoed in his mind. "Focus on the narrative, Jack. The stories are powerful." Yet, mounting evidence of dissent forced him to rethink his method. Jack had become adept at listening and collecting stories, but now he realized that change required more than a collection of voices. It needed to forge connections. On a Wednesday afternoon, he decided to trial an informal gathering. With a meticulously chosen group of like-minded colleagues, he would create a safe space for open dialogue. He hoped that by integrating personal anecdotes with professional ambitions, he could create a compelling narrative, the kind that made his colleagues see not only the necessity of change but the potential harmony it could bring. As he drafted the invitation, the weight of uncertainty resurfaced. Who would show up? And would anyone be open to engaging with ideas that challenged the status quo? The fear of isolation clawed at him, an intrusive thought that threatened to unravel his confidence. Yet, he pressed on, mixing enthusiasm with a sprinkle of vulnerability in the message. The day of the gathering, Jack arrived early to prepare the space. He intended to reshape the atmosphere away from confrontation toward collaboration. Neatly arranged chairs, calming background music, and, of course, coffee. With setup complete, he waited, pulse quickening with anxiety. One by one, colleagues trickled in. Initially, small talk filled the air, laughter dancing lightly above the tension. But as the soft music faded, Jack felt the shift. Moving from casual chatter to the crux of the gathering, he launched into a story that laid bare his own vulnerabilities. Change can feel daunting, he admitted, especially when you sense it shaking up the comfortable foundations we've built. But what if we work together to redefine our future, not just on paper, but in practice? Nods and curious glances tracked his words. Some were still skeptical, but the floodgates began to open. He prompted others to share their perspectives, the dialogue transforming from hesitant opinions to impassioned discussions. Slowly, a ship of solidarity started to emerge from the stormy seas of doubt. Yet, as conversations raced forward, he caught a glimpse of the lingering skepticism in the back of the room the senior managers he'd overheard. Their faces remained stone-faced, a wall that sent waves of anxiety through him. Would they ultimately support or derail his fledgling initiative? After the meeting concluded, the air felt charged. Colleagues lingered, voices stitched together with a sense of kinship. Jack caught Laura's eye as she approached him, her expression glowing with that spark of shared victory. "You did it, Jack. They're invested." But the realization struck him like a thunderclap, this was merely the first step. The senior managers would have heard the enthusiasm, yet their presence loomed larger now. He had mobilized the support, but now he needed the power players aboard. The contrast between the electrifying connection he had just fostered and the ice-cold demeanor of the senior leaders couldn't have been more palpable. A knot formed in his stomach as he pondered the next step. Would he take this momentum and confront them directly, or would he tread more carefully, building the bridge slowly? As Jack retreated to his office that evening, he felt exhilaration mingled with foreboding. He grasped that momentum was a fragile thing, and he was standing at the intersection of a vital turning point in his career and personal growth. The path ahead was fraught with potential danger but equally rich with possibility. The time had come to decide: would he summon the courage to confront the skeptics and advocate for change head-on, or would he choose to strengthen the coalition he had cultivated? Each option felt monumental. The essence of who he was as a leader hung in the balance. The soft light of his desk lamp illuminated the blank page before him, offering a canvas for inspiration. The choices he had to make now loomed large, whispering a simple yet profound truth: momentum without action could lead merely to daydreams, but the moment of truth was rapidly approaching. Would he seize it? Jack stared at the blank page, the silence of his office amplifying the echoes of doubt swirling in his mind. There was an electrifying potential, but an undertow of fear threatened to drag him under. He could feel the warmth of his colleagues' enthusiasm resonating in his chest, a stark contrast to the chilling gaze of the senior managers who had watched his informal gathering with unyielding stoicism. That he recognized that this was a moment of truth, not just for his career but for his identity as a leader. Would he move decisively to challenge the skeptics, or would he retreat into caution, letting the opportunity slip away? As his heart raced, he leaned back in his chair and began to visualize his options. Confrontation came with its own peril. His mind flashed to the senior managers' faces, impassive and skeptical. They represented not just authority but a tempered reality that had beheld many a visionary burn out with misplaced courage. Yet, stagnation, he realized, was also a form of surrender. Did he want to be the architect of change or merely a caretaker of the status quo? This mental tussle felt like a clash between his aspirations and his fears. Jack took a deep breath, reminding himself of the stories shared in that small gathering, the hopes, dreams, and the collective yearning for something greater. They had believed in him, in a vision that transcended simple metrics or quarterly reports. He could not afford to let their passion go unrepresented, nor should he allow the senior leader's apathy to define the outcome of his initiative. Making a decision felt like climbing a steep hill, yet he sensed he had to act. The next step became clearer. He would request a meeting with the senior managers, armed not only with his coalition's enthusiasm but also with tangible examples of proposed changes, how they would not just affect the business but reshape the company culture for the better. That night, he penned an email outlining his desire to discuss potential pathways for change, using the script already brewing in his mind. "I would like the chance to present the feedback and ideas gathered during our recent sessions. I believe we can align our goals with an approach that fosters growth and innovation," he wrote, each word invigorating a sense of purpose within him. After sending the email, silence returned to the office, a stark reminder of the loaded consequences of his action. Would they dismiss it, recognizing the unusual initiative as merely the clamor of naive enthusiasm? Or could this be the turning point he sought? Fueled by determination but haunted by uncertainty, he crossed his fingers and hoped for the best. The next morning, a response landed in his inbox, terse but clear: "We can meet Wednesday at 2. Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him, the first sign that his initiative had piqued their interest. Yet, with the relief came a surge of fresh anxiety. What if they shot down his ideas? What if they exposed gaps in his arguments? The duality of excitement and fear churned within him, leading to restless minutes as he prepared for the confrontation ahead. By Tuesday night, Jack was awake deep into the hours, rehearsing his points, weaving statistics with the heartfelt stories from his colleagues. He could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. But with this weight came clarity. These were not just numbers or data points, they were human stories, aspirations intertwined with the fate of their workplace. As he finally laid his head down, exhaustion settled in, but a single thought lingered: he was ready to face them. He had faced uncertainty before in his journey, and now he was about to confront the very leaders who held the keys to his vision. Jack awoke with a jolt on Wednesday morning, the familiar cadence of adrenaline kicking in. As he dressed, he silently recited his key points, the room pulsing with a tension that mirrored his own trepidation. The moment approached inexorably. Would he seize this opportunity and advocate effectively for change, or would the weight of their scrutiny prove too great? As he reached for the door, an unexpected thought pierced through the haze: what if he had underestimated his own influence? Jack stepped into the corridor, determination igniting within. There was still one final question to consider, looming larger than the rest. How could he ensure this meeting wasn't just another dialogue, but the catalyst for a transformation? The clock was counting down, and his moment was almost here. He had to embrace this defining moment and perhaps even surprise himself in the process. Jack stepped into the boardroom, his heart racing with a blend of anticipation and fear. The polished table and austere decor reminded him of the very hierarchy that had once felt insurmountable. Yet, with every stride across the threshold, he felt lighter, a burgeoning sense of purpose ignited within him. This was no longer merely about bringing forth the voices that had been drowned out, it was about asserting his own. As the senior managers settled into their seats, Jack took a deep breath, grounding himself as he prepared to present the stories and concerns that had been shared in the weeks leading to this moment. Laura had been instrumental in refining his narrative, training him to navigate the labyrinth of corporate nuances with precision. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today," Jack began, his voice steady, emboldened by clarity. He could see eyes flicker toward him, a variety of expressions flashing across the faces around the table: curiosity, skepticism, and perhaps a hint of apprehension. He pushed through, his confidence swelling with each carefully chosen word. "I'm here not just to voice my thoughts but to articulate collective concerns from our team, issues that resonate deeply with many of us, including concerns from those who feel overwhelmed, overlooked, and undervalued." Activating the projector, Jack shared poignant anecdotes and data that interwove personal stories with the need for systemic change. As he painted a picture of the lived experiences of his colleagues, the atmosphere shifted. The once skeptical expressions began to soften, revealing an openness he had hoped for. This was a pivotal moment. He was putting himself not just as the janitor but as an advocate forward. He was demanding recognition not only for himself but for all those who had once felt invisible in this high-stakes environment. As he detailed proposed actions, workshops that fostered dialogue, transparent feedback channels, and initiatives aimed at cultivating inclusivity, the mood in the room visibly transformed. The senior managers began to nod, engaging in quiet discussions among themselves. Jack harnessed this momentum to challenge them further, pointing out the powerful benefits of embracing diverse perspectives not just morally, but also in enhancing productivity and innovation. The meeting concluded, and instead of leaving Brentwood Baker behind as another face in the crowd, Jack felt an exhilarating sense of accomplishment. While the response was non-committal, he had planted a crucial seed. He had successfully initiated a dialogue that had once seemed impossible. As he exited the boardroom, the shift within him felt profound. He had not just shared ideas, he had conquered his fear of confrontation. Exiting the office that day, he felt airier, almost buoyant. He had proven to himself that he could step out of the shadows. The next challenge loomed, certainly, and though apprehension lingered, a sustained sense of determination propelled him onward. The influence of his voice echoed through the firm, reflecting a monumental turn in his journey. Beyond professional acknowledgement, he discovered a personal metamorphosis, one that had endowed him with solid confidence, recognized competence, and the assurance that he belonged at the table before him. Weeks later, as the firm began to implement some of his proposals, Jack attended a leadership celebration event. Amongst colleagues, he stood tall, no longer a ghost navigating the periphery but a vibrant participant in the ongoing evolution of the firm's culture. With each confidence gained, doubt steadily eroded. It was an achievement worth savoring. This moment, he knew, wasn't the end. He had turned the tide not just for himself but for those who had yet to find their voice. What he had accomplished was about creating spaces for others to flourish, empowering them to share their narratives. They no longer had to remain silent. As the sun set behind the towers of downtown, Jack grinned, ready to embrace whatever came next. Because for the first time in his life, he understood, change starts with courage. And he was here to challenge, to uplift, and to thrive. Now, turn the page in your own journey. What are you waiting for? It's time to subscribe immediately to our channel and dive into more exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformation. Leave a like now to fuel our community. Your support is vital. Share your reactions and theories about this powerful ending in the comments below. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how bold steps lead to profound change. You need to be a part of this journey.